podcast put together with Red Raider fans in mind. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3.
Hello there, it's Tech Talk on Double T 97.3 and Double T 97.3.com. Alongside Mike Gustafson and Clint Scott, I'm Aaron Dickens. We're joining you today until 6 o'clock. Would love to hear your thoughts and your comments on the Yates Flooring Center chat line at Double T 97.3.com. All guests appear via the Benchmark hotline. We'd love to get your thoughts and comments on the Yates Flooring Center chat line. You've now won 4 straight against the Mountaineers, right? This year, last year, the COVID year in 2019. You realize that you have held them below 100 rushing yards in all 4 of those games?
Wow.
You know, and it's not like...
Yeah.
I think on Saturday you can maybe understand... You could maybe excuse that away, right? And say, well, you know, the game was pretty lopsided, fairly early on, and so they weren't able to just kind of stay on schedule and stay in the normal offense, had to throw it more. That's fine. But last year it was a 3-point game, and the year before that it was a 7-point game. And then in 2019 it was a 21-point game. So it wasn't like they've just been chasing you from behind all 4 of these games. I don't know what it means, and heck, you've had however many different coaches and defensive coordinators over that 4-year span, but I thought that was very interesting because I can't imagine that's the list of teams you've held below 100 yards in 4 consecutive meetings. I can't imagine that list is very long.
Yeah, it feels good to have somebody's number.
Yeah. Sure does.
I can think of a couple numbers I'd like to remove ourselves from being their number.
Sure. What did you think of Baron Morton?
Yeah, obviously he played well. The thing that impresses me is his ability to manage the tempo, because they're trying to play fast and they're doing it, and it's become something that I think they're better at with him under center. And I think we got an indication of that from Coach McGuire today, which wasn't his way of saying he's. In fact, I think there was a question during the media when it got into the weeds that media availability today about, do you think Barron runs tempo better than Shuck? Of course, all the inevitable, and maybe even Don. I can't remember exactly how the question was worded, but I'm just impressed by that, because that's a really young quarterback that's managing that side of it, and he got under OSU's skin, which was a pretty good accomplishment, and then I thought really dictated things the other day, and they do that, and this was again addressed in the media. They do that to really create. It helps our offensive line. It'll be great to be at a point that we can line up and just dominate you and stay in the huddle and come out and ram it down your throat, but not there yet. And so the tempo is something that if you get the right personnel groupings on the field and you can keep the play inbounds and keep the complete passes and things like that, they can keep tempo, and then you're dragging those 11 dudes on the other side through.
And they can't sub.
Yeah, they can't sub.
Right.
And
Not easily.
You're not subbing either, but it's something that they did, like I said, with effectiveness in Stillwater. Obviously did it well the other day, and appears to be something that they're, Kitley talked about. Well, yeah, we want to play even faster. That's great as long as it's effective, because what they're trying not to do is go have those 40-second possessions that drag the defense down, and
because that's so hard to do, man.
Yeah,
you look around the country, and it has not been unique to Texas Tech. Whenever these teams have run tempo offensively, and they put up big numbers in most cases, but there's usually a pretty direct relationship between really focusing on tempo and putting your defense in a bind. I mean, look at North Carolina, the Tar Heels with Phil Longo. He runs tempo. They tempo the hell out of teams, or they'd like to at least. And that defense is bad. And their DC is Gene Chizik, and while he may have his flaws as a head coach and stuff, I mean, the man knows defense. He hasn't forgotten that stuff. And so, and so the fact that Tech has been able to be still so complimentary in terms of how it plays football as a team while it runs tempo on offense, and you haven't ever thought through 7 games like, oh, man, this defense is in trouble. It's astounding. It's perhaps one of the most impressive things about these first 7 games under McGuire.
I agree, because it felt like there were times, that when we've played tempo, certainly under Cliff and Wells and the respective offenses, that it felt like there were key moments where games were lost, and I can't point to specific games, but key moments in games where, of course, we weren't dealing with the defense that this Texas Tech team has. They're making plays and getting off the field, and it feels like they're deeper and been more productive. And I'm not saying they've been flawless, but that helps too. The other side of that compliment is just a defense playing well. But those 3 playing out 30-second possessions that just to me that just gut you after giving up a 8-play drive and a touchdown, and then you boom boom boom. And there's not a running play in there or anything to get any clock, do anything. And, these guys have been able to do it. And I'm sure part of it is, 4th down conversions and being successful with some of those. But again, the other day, double-digit play drives. And we talked about it, that some of that's due to there not being really a home run hitter. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of 80-yard touchdown passes. Xavier White's play probably the closest, right? The 55-yarder the other day where he made a couple dudes miss and then turn on the Jets. But
you had 5. You had 5 drives on Saturday of 12 or more plays.
Yeah, and did that against who? Texas? Wasn't Texas the other game that we did that?
Sounds about right.
Or it wasn't Houston.
Feels like there have been whole seasons where you haven't had 5 drives where you had 12 or more plays.
Yep, no doubt.
I mean, you had a 14-play, and this was your last scoring drive of the game. I mean, you were clearly kind of taking the foot off the pedal a little bit. You had a 14-play drive that went almost 8 minutes. 7:48. It's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just imposing your will
big time
on another Big 12 team. And I recognize, clearly, the Mountaineers are not very good, right? They're 1-3 for a reason. Now, they did beat Baylor.
I know. That's the thing I keep drawing from that. Like, well, I do like the fact that the last time Baylor went on the road, they went up there and lost to that operation. But
and we all know this, it's been a long time since you've been able to do this kind of thing against a team that's not wearing a Jayhawk on the helmet.
No, that's right. That's exactly right. Because even like you said, even though this is 4 in a row against West Virginia, it wasn't imposing your will.
No.
It was finding a way to win the game, but not imposing your will.
And now because you have won close already this year, you know how to win close. You've lost close too, even though the final scores haven't really reflected that in Stillwater and in Manhattan. But you've won big too, and I think that's I don't know. I remain very impressed.
I do too. I'm excited about this week, and I know we'll spend more time today on the West Virginia game than the Baylor game, but boy, that's an exciting one to think about. Just the night, and I'll be really general about it right now. The night game, etc. Just from 30,000 feet. That one, the night game around Halloween, just seems like it fits the script, right? And by the way, one of the little news pieces today, the Tech TCU kickoff game was kick time was set for the 6-day notice, so we won't know that until.
Did you see Tech's
Sunday
tweet about that?
Oh, let's see it.
It's spicy.
Okay, I missed it.
Texas Tech, the Texas Tech football account on Twitter today. Let's see.
I was training this
quote
morning.
Tweets the Big 12 conference's announcement. Hey, 6-day window. So these 4 games still kind of TBD.
Are all 4 of them TBD, or is it just a couple?
There's one game that's set.
Okay.
West Virginia at Iowa State. That's 2:30 on ESPN Plus.
Okay.
The other 4 are all up in the air. Tech football on Twitter. Quote: Kick time for our November 5th home game in DFW will be determined this weekend.
Nice. Good Lord.
A+.
Just going all in on that deal.
More Tech Talk next.
The podcast that finishes your workday in a very Red Raider way. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3.
West Virginia was at Poundland on Saturday. Let me tell you, 48-10 the final score. Red Raiders victorious, pushing their overall record to 4-3. With Dr. Mike Gustafson and Clint Scott, I'm Aaron Dickens. We're joining you today from the First United Bank Double T 97.3 studio with you until 6. Love to get your thoughts and comments on the Yates Flooring Center chat line at double T973.com. How about this stat? This is a wow stat for me, Gus.
Okay.
You know, Houston was thought to be pretty good entering this season, right? They were
coming off a 11-1.
Yeah, they were kind of, I think, 2.
Yeah, 10-2,
pegged
11-2,
to be the this year's group of 5, not playoff contender, but certainly big time bowl game representative, like UCF has done in the past,
sure.
Cincinnati, etc. They were that team, and clearly things have not gone to plan. They lose to Texas Tech. They get blown out at home by Kansas. They lose to Tulane, although that Tulane loss looks better and better as the weeks progress. They're 4-3. They have wins over UTSA, which is a nice win. They have a win over Rice, which, the Owls have some life. They beat Sonny Cumbie and La Tech over the weekend, unfortunately.
Trying to get bowl eligible, maybe.
Sure. They have a win over Memphis, and they got a win over Navy this past weekend, which is, hey, good for them. The Cougars led that game against Navy at the half, 21-7. That was their first halftime lead of the season.
Wow.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it is.
Like imagine telling a Cougars fan, if you could find one. Sorry, that was cheap. I'm better than that. No, I'm not. Imagine telling a Cougars fan before the season, hey, you're not going to get your first halftime lead until like October 22nd.
Yeah,
there's no way.
You're going to be carving pumpkins.
Yeah, and I guess on some level it speaks to the resiliency of that team or the quality of that team. And I'm not trying to pay them too many compliments, but the fact that they're 4-3 despite
never having
having one halftime lead this season, is pretty impressive. And then how about this too? Did you see where College Gameday is going this weekend?
No, I saw some criticism of it, but I was flipping real quick and didn't see the actual release, so no.
So Jackson State, Deion Sanders.
Oh yeah,
they will host ESPN's College Gameday.
Nice.
Jackson State is hosting Southern. Jackson State's undefeated. They're 7-0. They beat Campbell over the weekend.
The Camels.
Yeah. Southern is 5-2 overall. They're 3-1 in conference play.
Well, and, Deion Sanders, obviously the head coach there, was the. I think you can get on YouTube now and see the interview he did with 60 Minutes. You're reaching a certain level of cultural relevance when 60 Minutes says, hey, let's set aside the Ukrainian stories and all the other things that are going on. And, every once in a while they'll hit on I shouldn't say every once in a while, but I don't know, a couple times a season they'll hit on a sports story.
Well, and they interviewed the Barefoot Contessa, right? I think. Yeah. I didn't watch it, but I saw the stuff on Twitter.
That's right.
But here's what's interesting, Gus. You've got Ohio State at Penn State, an undefeated Buckeyes team taking on a top 15 Penn State team with one loss.
Right.
Snooze fest.
You think?
Right. And then also, if that does tickle your fancy, all right, if you're not intrigued by that,
yep.
You've got Oklahoma State at Kansas State, a pair of 3-1 teams in the Big 12, both ranked. Oklahoma State's top 10, coming off a nice big win over the Chokhorns. And then K-State was arguably the better team on Saturday and probably should have won that game against TCU were it not for some untimely injuries. Here's the problem, Gus. But both those games, both of those matchups that are infinitely more impactful on the college football race, the playoff,
right.
the games that most people care about.
Sure.
You know what they have in common?
What's that? Fox.
They're both on Fox. 11 a.m., big noon kickoff. Buckeyes at Nittany Lions, and then 2:30, Pokes at the Wildcats.
You know, it feels like there's a week or two every year, and it's usually late. And I would say November. I would have guessed November. I would have said November, but maybe not necessarily. Of course, I guess this is as late. This is as late as it gets without being November, right? This coming weekend, but that game day will jump into, and they've done this. They've done a show in Fargo, with North Dakota State.
Sure.
Coming down the stretch of one of their really good FCS seasons, they've done Williams and Amherst, which is one of the little Division III rivals that goes back to who knows when, 18 something, and so there's always one. My curiosity would be how far in advance that they look at that and go, where are we getting off the trail a little bit, and how much do they look at that and go, hey, we've got it. This is the year to go get Jackson State. The Dion and that team and him and all of that is the story. We can't put that off to next year because he might be at, who knows, Auburn, Georgia Tech, who knows. So, do they start looking at, because they can't take that deal and go, hey, let's do 7-0 them versus 3-4 somebody. What's a meaningful game on their schedule that's on their campus? And so they probably have to start pinning down some deals, and they go, hey, if we pick this later one though, that could be up against Georgia, Tennessee, or whatever, or Tennessee at Georgia, which is in 10 days, 12 days.
Yeah, I hate to be.
I just wonder how big picture they go with that.
But because I have watched Game Day more this year than I have. Have you really? In the last 5 years combined.
I would probably say the opposite, and not really intentionally, but I think I've watched less than, and I can't tell you why. It just hasn't.
And it's
come
not that I've
for me.
Been sitting there, eyes glued to the TV for a few hours, but it's on.
Sure.
And so they actually kind of, and this is not unusual, they talked about rather openly, like, hey, if UCF and Cincinnati win this weekend, we might be at that game in Orlando, because both of those teams are playing on Saturday. Bearcats are a 1-point favorite. UCF did not hold up their end of the bargain.
Right.
They lose to Eastern Carolina, kind of get blown out there. East Carolina, excuse me. And so, that game was on their radar, which broadcast on ESPN.
Sure. I wouldn't I'm not poo-pooing that idea. I just wonder how much of it, somewhere back in September, they're like, hey, this is the year we got to get Jackson State. When's it going to be?
Yeah. I don't.
As opposed to Williams and Amherst, as opposed to Harvard, Yale, as opposed to,
because they were in Boone, right? If we want to talk about the charitable, non-power.
That's true. That was early.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They were in Boone, North Carolina on September 17th, and that was a great game. Mm-hmm. That was the game where Appy State won on a last-minute Hail Mary. They were at North Carolina Central last year for the MEAC SWAC Challenge. Although I think that game was actually played in Atlanta, the Georgia Dome or whatever.
Yep.
More Tech Talk next.
The podcast put together with Red Raider fans in mind. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3.
Hey, it's the Juice on Double T 97.3 and Double T 97.3.com. Your look at today's biggest sports headlines, brought to you by our friends at Specs Wine, Spirits, and Finer Foods. Baron Morton, redshirt freshman quarterback, was named Big 12 Newcomer of the Week today, following his second 300-yard performance in the Red Raiders' 48-10 rout of West Virginia. First career weekly honor for Morton. He finished 28 of 45 for 325 yards, a pair of touchdowns. He departed the game early in the fourth quarter with the lead in hand, as he became the 8th Red Raider in the Big 12 era to throw for at least 300 yards in his first career start, joining Sonny Cumbie, Cody Hodges, Graham Harrell, Taylor Potts, Baker Mayfield, Davis Webb, and Nick Shimanek. How about this? Tech and Baylor on Saturday. Fans are encouraged to wear black. Sold out crowd. Kickoff at 6:30. So far this year, Tech is undefeated at home. Hopefully that continues. First night game since the 7 o'clock season opener against Murray State. All time, well, in the last 20 years, Tech is 44-18 in home night games. How about that?
I like the sound of that.
Yeah, last night in the MLB playoffs, a pair of teams punched their tickets to the Fall Classic. The Philadelphia Phillies wrapped up a gentleman's sweep of the San Diego Padres, winning Game 5 4-3 in the series 4-1. And then in the Bronx last night, the Houston Astros with a regular sweep over the New York Yankees 6-5. Astros and Phillies set for the World Series. Game 1 scheduled for Friday at 7:03 from Minute Maid Park. You too can join the program. Would love to hear from you today. Let us know what you think on the Yates Flooring Center chat line. You had a stat that you wanted to share?
Yep. Big 12 related.
Okay, I'm here for it.
Talking about the Longhorns. We talked about that earlier. Of course, they lost in Stillwater the other day, and big first half, and then just gave it up in the second half.
Petered out.
Yep, got a bit of pattern, and ran it. Like they got the two running backs going early. Quinn Ewers, was 19 for 49. Since 2000, only two other FBS quarterbacks have thrown 49-plus passes in a game and completed less than 20. That's a lot of games. Note that I didn't say Big 12 quarterbacks or Longhorn quarterbacks.
Or Power 5.
Yeah.
FBS. That's incredible.
It really is. Especially in this day and age where so much of the offense can be scripted around hey, get the ball out of your hand. Get it out to a back, or 8 guys drop deep, or how many bubble screens. And, there's a lot of things that can be done to sort of get balls in the hands of playmakers and go do some things without having to get the ball up the field. And that they were unable to do so. I don't know what that says. I don't know if that's because this wasn't slop blowout game time. I mean, most of that game was played, with the game within a score, go score and tie, or with them protecting a lead, and so it's just hard to imagine. I don't know if that's bad play design, if that's on Ewers, what that is, but that surprises me.
Yeah, I mean, because
like I said,
he's supposed to be better than that,
right?
Man.
You can have the tight end go down there 4 yards and drill him in the gut, and it's 2nd and 6. I mean, and that's.
I don't understand how they're that. I mean, they scored 34 points, which
right.
And they led that game for so long.
Right.
They absolutely should have won that game.
They ran it well enough that
like when
they created problems for OSU. Like OSU, I can't sit here and tell you about the tactical adjustments because I was enjoying the Red Raiders game, but in the stadium. But when I'm shoving it down their throat in the running game, you've got to do some things to adjust that probably make you vulnerable to the pass, I think, in very general terms. So it sounds like to me OSU lined up and just took their receivers out.
At what point do you start to – because, I mean, he was pretty good against Oklahoma, right? And they scored 49 points and they blanked them, and that game is a source of optimism and positive feelings for Texas fans and will remain so. I mean, it's a fountain of positivity. But the further you get out from it, right? I mean, he didn't play all that great against Iowa State. They win 24-21. Did not play well against the Pokes. He wasn't like – I don't know that he was – we've seen worse games from Texas quarterbacks, right? Texas Tech has seen worse games.
Oh, sure.
Texas fans have certainly seen worse games from their quarterbacks. But, it's not getting easier. They're off this week. They've got an open week, which, good for them. They play at Kansas State. That defense is legit, right? Especially in Manhattan. Then they host TCU. Like, you're not there's no easy out here or even like a medium out here until you get to Kansas. Sorry, Clint.
Well,
19th of November.
And if you told me that they can't complement this with any running game or offensive line's a big problem or whatever, but that's not what we're talking about here. I mean, we're talking about
Bijan Robinson,
right?
Xavier Worthy.
Yes, and the backup
Roshan
running
Johnson,
back. Yeah, did some stuff. Or I shouldn't even call it the backup, but the number 2. And it is a young, talented offensive line, but that's just it just doesn't add up that they come out and run it early, establish the run, and then that there's nothing through the air later on. And this is just this will be the cheap shot here, and it's not really intended to be a cheap shot, but then he takes his helmet off, and good God, that hair, this is your golden boy, face of Wrangler jeans, $2 million if you believe the rumors, NIL deal, just doesn't add up, man. I mean, it just doesn't add up in terms of image and all of those things. And I get it. I could care less what the kid's hair looks like and anything else, but it's the kind of thing. And again, I'm delighting in it, but it's just like the dude's like this scraggly mess, and he's playing like crap, and I'm going, man.
At some point, it wears thin.
Yeah.
Right? And with the good performance in a couple of weekends against Kansas State, maybe it all flips. And
no
still,
doubt.
I guess his defense, fairly young player.
Sure.
And the physical tools, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not burying the guy. It's just that
that's right. It's just but it's the same thing. It's the same thing that all of those guys sort of suffer from down there, that they get so much hype shoveled their way that's probably not even fair to them, that when when they don't deliver, it's just this avalanche of response to it, because huge following, huge fan base, blah, blah, blah. I get it. But it creates all this sort of schadenfreude dump on this kid that you go, man, but that's I guess that's life, right? That's we're everybody's biggest game. I'll deal with it.
That's what you sign up for when you play at Texas, and he's getting paid handsomely.
You bet.
So
you bet.
All is fair. And speaking of failing to deliver, man, how about all of these? Not all, but so many of these Omega contracts that some of these coaches have. Like, how about Jimbo Fisher? How about Mario Cristobal?
Oh my God, dude! Right,
that guy got a massive payday to go to Miami, and they've been blown up by Middle Tennessee State.
Yeah,
Mel Tucker, the Spartans aren't great this year either.
The Aggies aren't doing anything this year, but there was a big article. It's 86 or 89 million that if they decided to can him next, whatever, in a month, 80-something million dollars. I get it. You're Aggies and this, all that, but good God. What that also means to me is like there's no boss. He's bossless.
No pressure.
Who's telling him what to do? You owe me 86 million,
and it's not even offset.
Right. And and they've even extended his contract after his little NCAA scrape, so they can't. There's no cause there.
More tech talk next.
It's every Red Raiders' favorite podcast. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3.
Hey there, it's Tech Talk on Double T 97.3 and Double T 97.3.com with Mike Gustafson and Clint Scott. I'm Aaron Dickens. We're with you until 6 o'clock today. Would love to hear your thoughts and comments on the Yates Flooring Center chat line at Double T 97.3.com. We were discussing ESPN Gameday's choice of setting up shop at Jackson State this weekend as they take on Southern, as opposed to Ohio State at Penn State or Oklahoma State at Kansas State. This person says in the chat line, so HBCUs should only get a chance in the ESPN Sun if they have the right TV rights. Genuinely asking, not prodding. Yeah, I mean, they can clearly do whatever they want with their program. I just think that it's clearly not the most interesting or most compelling matchup of the day. It's not even in the top 25 in terms of most compelling matchups. Not one person, that isn't like directly affiliated with, Jackson State is going to choose to watch that game over Ohio State, Penn State. Not that they're on at the same time, but you know what I mean. Or any kind of SEC game or Texas Tech and Baylor. It's just not happening. I don't even know what channel that game is on. It might be on ESPN Plus. And when, because at the end of game day, right, you get they do the picks, the previews. They have the special guest picker and all that stuff. Are you telling me that Lee Corso is going to, give a good breakdown of Jackson State and Southern, right? Like, is Desmond Howard going to go all in, like, or Reese Davis or Kirk? Like, they're not watching those games, right? It's hard enough to watch Power 5 games and keep up with those teams and programs and players. So it just seems to me more like, hey, ESPN of directly avoiding Fox broadcasts than it is about like actually going to some kind of compelling matchup.
Yeah, I think they had Jackson State circled for all the right reasons, and had to find a game, and again, I think it's great. I think it's, like I said, I'd be curious to know how they do that. I'm kind of stepping away from what you're saying a little bit, just to say we got to get on Jackson. We got to get to Jackson, Mississippi this year. We got to get a Jackson State game. The Deion Sanders thing is big. What they're doing there is special. There's what he's doing there is special. 60 Minutes, as we talked about earlier, and my curiosity about it has more to do with them looking at the schedule and saying, okay, we got three options here. What are we up against if we wait and do it on this weekend? And then we're up against, fill in the blank game, USC, UCLA, or I don't know. You're tying it a little bit to the ESPN Fox thing, which is, I can't argue with that.
And it's not even about, like, I'm not sitting here just like, stark raving mad about them going to Jackson State. I mean, I want to watch. I'm sure Deion Sanders will have an interesting interview. I've actually watched quite a few of his post games over the last few weeks because I think that he gives an interesting perspective that usually isn't just full of coach speak, which is a nice kind of change of pace. But it's really kind of the canary in the coal mine for me is not about them going to Jackson, which is a great song, by the way. It's that, they probably would have gone to Orlando for Cincinnati UCF had UCF held up its end of the bargain and won in Greenville over the weekend and beat East Carolina. And so, like, if your top two choices are those two versus Ohio State at Penn State or Oklahoma State at Kansas State, yeah, that to me, that's just telling on yourself, really.
Yeah, and that it really speaks to something we've talked about all year long, going back to, or at least all since you and I have been on the show, and we talked a ton about media rights and the Fox versus ESPN thing, which is and the Big Ten versus SEC media rights is I mean, that's the thing. And there's a Lubbock Cooper connection. You know, we got a text about that earlier.
We
There's
did.
a Lubbock Cooper connection. Deep snapper at Jackson State is a former Pirate, so that's cool. There's a Lubbock connection there. And yeah, that's neat. I mean, it's got to be a special time to be involved in that program. I mean, going back to what? That's Jackson State. That's Walter Payton. That's going back to my childhood.
The what's interesting about, or what I find interesting about Jackson State is, I mean, they're 7-0. They've been in the top 10 of the FCS poll, I think, fairly consistently. I don't know what they are right now, but they were 9th at least a few weeks ago, so I can only imagine they've climbed since then. But if they win their conference, which they certainly seem on track to do, they will not be going to the playoffs, right? So, like, I'd love to be able to see Jackson State play, you know, some of the FCS powers, and I don't know who's good this year, but you always think North Dakota State
sure,
or some of the Montana programs, whatever. But the champion of the SWAC plays in the Celebration Bowl, and so they would not be eligible, which is, you know, the history is the history, and so clearly they're fine with it, which is all that matters, I guess. But as a college football fan,
right?
I'd love to see that.
I would too. I'd love to see them make a run. I mean, that would be fascinating. It really would. I think it'd be great theater to see where that matches up. No doubt.
This and the Yates Flooring Center chat line from Raiders Depth. The Sunday College Football Wrap-Up 1 hour show had one Big 12 mention. It was more about Sarkisian than the game. They had teams featured on there that I had never heard of. I want to leave traditional media as soon as possible. Give me all streaming and build a Big 12 network of shows and content. This in the chat line. Ewers is Garrett Gilbert 2.0. Both played well for a quarter or two against Bama, but did not live up in the rest of the games. He was praised for putting points up on OU when everyone else was doing the same.
And they're obviously recruiting well. And that young O-line's only going to get bigger and better, and I would assume. But you know, the longer that drags out, the more the Manning thing flips into the conversation. And what does that look like? Does he walk in and compete for that job as a true freshman? You know, with all the Ewers hype, and that's all of that just gets fueled by him not playing well. But then what's the offset there? Like, hey, you're going to lose the best running back you've had around there in a while. You know, like, he's not going to be around to carry some of that load and take some of that heat off. So,
I mean, and we know what this is like when you have a transcendent kind of generational talent on your football team and not really have much to show for it, right? And that's what, I mean, and things can turn. But so far, that's what Texas has to show for Bijan Robinson. Really nothing in terms of team accomplishments.
Yeah, and certainly not by their standards.
Right, yeah, it's all relative.
Yeah.
This in the chat line from David. Hindsight, I'm glad that he passed on us, LOL. This on the chat line from Shelley. Is Jimbo's contract really $84 million?
I think it's, and that's I think it was extended. He was extended a year or two ago, and it's I think right now it's sitting at 90 something. But again, I'm saying if he was fired in December without cause,
and see that's
which means just for losing too many games, that I think they have to either, I don't know how that works, if they have to stroke a check for $86 million or if they just keep paying it out over the next 10 years, but it's unbelievable.
And who are you up against? Like, why were you rushing to give that extension? And that's like, if you look at it, those early unneeded kind of just gift extensions are what gets these programs in trouble. I mean, for Neil Brown got an extension, I think, last year. at West Virginia. And they're on the hook for like $16 million. Like, if they fire him before 2024, they owe him everything on his deal. 100%. Good job. Great job. Ever since the fire went out.
You've been listening to the Tech Talk podcast from Double T 97.3. Check out Double T973.com for more from Lubbock Sports Station.